In early 2026, the Western alliance is facing one of the most serious internal stress tests in its history. President Donald Trump has revived demands over Greenland, threatened punitive tariffs against close allies, and publicly attacked Britain over Diego Garcia, a military base the United States itself depends on. This isn't a prediction. What you're about to hear is an analysis of where current incentives, power politics, and alliance behavior are pointing. Is this just aggressive negotiation, or is NATO being pushed into territory it has never faced before, pressure from within? And most importantly, who benefits from this? Let's break it down. Greenland looks empty on a map, but strategically it sits at one of the most important crossroads on the planet. It lies between North America and Europe, controls access to the Arctic, and spans over 2 million square kilometers, larger than most countries. Greenland is not a sovereign NATO member. It is an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark, which is a founding NATO member. The United States already has a military presence there. Thule Air Base has operated since 1951 under a bilateral defense agreement. So the question isn't why the U.S. cares about Greenland. Every major power does. The real question is why escalate now and why this way? There are three strategic drivers. First, critical minerals. Greenland holds rare earth elements essential for advanced weapons, semiconductors, renewable energy systems, and electric vehicles. Today, China dominates global rare earth refining. Reducing that dependence is a legitimate strategic concern. Second, the Arctic itself is changing. As ice retreats, new shipping routes are opening, shortening travel between Asia, Europe, and North America. Whoever controls access controls leverage. Third, great power competition. Russia has heavily militarized the Arctic. China now calls itself a near-Arctic state and is investing across the region. None of this is controversial. What is controversial is the method. Tariffs framed as punishment, public pressure on an ally, and open threats against other allies. For NATO, this crosses a psychological red line. The alliance was built on the assumption that disputes between members are resolved internally, not through pressure tactics. Now compare this with Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia is a small island in the Indian Ocean, but it hosts one of the most important joint U.S.-UK military bases in the world. It has supported operations from the Cold War through Iraq and Afghanistan. In 2025, the United Kingdom reached an agreement returning sovereignty of the island to Mauritius while retaining full military access under a long-term lease. Crucially, U.S. access to the base did not change. At the time, the agreement was praised by Washington as securing the long-term operation of the facility. That's why the later reversal matters. When the same deal is suddenly described as weakness, the issue isn't Diego Garcia itself. The base remains operational. The strategic balance didn't shift. What changed was the broader confrontation over Greenland. Public criticism of Britain functions as pressure signaling, a warning to allies who resist alignment on Greenland. This is not about consistency, it's about leverage. NATO has survived Vietnam, Iraq, the Cold War, and previous periods of U.S.-European tension. So is this different? Yes, because coercion inside the alliance is new. NATO is not just a military pact, it's a trust-based system. Tariffs used as punishment, private messages made public, and open threats undermine that trust, even if no formal treaty is broken. European reactions have been unusually unified, not emotional, but institutional. Statements emphasize rules, alliance norms, and collective credibility. Even in Washington, some lawmakers have warned that this dynamic benefits Russia and China more than anyone else. Meanwhile, the U.S. Supreme Court is weighing whether the president's use of emergency tariff powers is constitutional. That ruling could either de-escalate the situation or legitimize economic coercion against allies. At this point, the question is no longer just about Greenland. It's about whether NATO operates by consent
or by dominance. Neither Moscow nor China needs NATO to collapse. They only need it distracted. Russia benefits when Europe doubts American reliability. China benefits when Europe debates strategic autonomy. This is not a formal Russia-China military alliance. It's alignment through opportunity. China has become Russia's economic and technological lifeline during the Ukraine war. Russia, in turn, absorbs Western attention and resources. When the transatlantic alliance turns inward, both gain strategic space. Ironically, pressure on allies weakens the very coalition meant to counter these powers. So where does this end? There are four realistic scenarios. First, negotiated adjustment. The U.S. gains expanded access, mineral cooperation, or defense commitments without any change in sovereignty. NATO survives, but trust is damaged. Second, functional NATO reduced dependence. Europe doesn't leave NATO, but builds parallel defense capacity and reduces reliance on Washington. This quietly reshapes the alliance. Third, severe rupture. Military coercion or extreme pressure triggers an unprecedented crisis. This remains unlikely, but the consequences would be historic. Fourth, domestic constraint. Congress or the courts limit executive authority, deflating the confrontation. This is possible, but politically difficult. None of these outcomes strengthen NATO. Some merely limit the damage. This isn't about ice, islands, or minerals alone. The post-World War II global order rests on a simple idea that borders can't be changed by force and that alliances provide security through rules, not fear. If coercion becomes acceptable among allies, that norm weakens everywhere. Smaller states notice, non-aligned states hedge, authoritarian powers test limits. Countries in the global south, India, Brazil, Southeast Asia, and Africa are already reassessing assumptions about Western leadership. This accelerates a world where power matters more than rules. So will this destroy NATO? Not yet. But alliances don't fail overnight. They erode through doubt. Once allies begin planning without each other, the damage is already underway. The tragedy is that the real global threats, climate change, pandemics, nuclear proliferation, and authoritarian expansion, require cooperation, not coercion. The coming months will determine whether this episode becomes a temporary crisis or a permanent fracture. The clock is ticking.